I want the public to know that anybody, any race, any gender, that person can be a groomer.
Survivor Tribe sat down with two survivors of sexual trauma.
Hi, my name is Starr, and I'm a survivor.
Hi, my name's Nimi, and I'm a survivor.
To have an in-depth conversation about grooming.
When someone's paying attention to your child, more specifically, singling them out, spending time alone with them, or trying to get them alone consistently, and even buying them things, whether it's anything small to like a chocolate bar or a Slurpee to something that's much larger, pay attention to those things, ask why is this happening.
Here is what they had to say.
I'm going to say that I don't know, honestly, that my abusers groomed the community around us. And I'm going to say that from my experience. I do think that he had other victims as well, but the relationship that uh, it was family, but they weren't like the family that was always there. Like, you know how some of the family always gathers up? They weren't there. Like, they would come in, maybe once a month or so. At first, it seemed. And whenever it first happened, I mean, I don't even think that there was any like grooming of me. It just, we were alone and he did it. Now, because the other abuser was his brother, I don't know if there was some conversation between them. It was never done at the same time. So I don't know really how that worked, if it was an off conversation that they had. But as far as the family and what you would typically think about, like with grooming, like that relationship just wasn't there, like the cultivation of a relationship, because they didn't come around that much when it initially started. So it was just kind of like boom. And then it was just I expect you to find yourself in some space with me by myself, like alone from that point forward. So I hope that answers your question. But when you think about the typical grooming, like that wasn't my experience. But I will say that the the interactions that I had with the first brother then kind of just made me be like, oh, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do with the second one, if that makes sense.
With myself, it wasn't a member like of the community. It was actually a family friend, and I would say that he groomed or I should say they, because there's three brothers, and they groomed the older two brothers groomed my parents, as well as their parents. Their sisters actually ended up knowing what was happening, and didn't interject. I don't know if they were groomed. Again, in like in the actual sense of when pedophiles groom a community, but I do recall the sisters being threatened at one point, when one of them was taking me. um, the sister interjected and said, stop or whatever, and he swore back at her and told her to stop talking. And with my and so I in that relationship, I was too young to know or remember. But in terms of my parents, um they portrayed themselves as these amazing individuals who were kind and caring, and wanted to just play with kids. um and My parents didn't know. They thought that we were being treated really well, that there was like, these older kids, kind of almost like, older siblings. But I was 3 when it started, and the oldest was 19, 20, going off to university. And so, yeah, my parents couldn't fathom that this would be happening. And the way that they were around my parents, and behind closed doors, was completely different. So they definitely groomed my parents. My parents had no idea that this was happening. And so, in that sense, definitely there was grooming involved. They would convince my parents to let us stay longer or stay overnight. And they didn't live far from my parents, like maybe 5, 10 minutes away. And so, yeah, in that sense, the community wasn't groomed. They didn't really have access to other kids at the town. The town was pretty small, and they weren't really kids who were out in public all that much. I'm guessing school, and that's about it. But yeah, that's how they groomed my family.
Okay, so yeah, I think the ramifications around my abuser, one of them grooming the community, I guess that community would have been my mother, um, because at one point he needed a place to live, and she was, the favorite aunt, and she's always been a helper, just like my grandmother has always been a helper. And so she wasn't thinking about it, but what that really did was give him unfettered access to me. You know what I'm saying? And then she's not thinking, oh, if I have to, so it's someone, so I don't have to be home alone, like if my big brother is not there and different things like that. So um, I think that he was just able to capitalize off of the relationship that he had with my mother, to be able to get inside of our home and then, you know, have a greater access to me, because prior to then, like I said, it wouldn't be something that like I would see him all the time, but now you live in my house.
So the ramifications for me, fortunately, weren't that like my parents still believed me, because after my parents found out through a school counselor when I was about 15, and so when I was 18, I made a report with the police, and at that time when they were detained and held for questioning, they then went and started coming to or trying to call my parents, and trying to convince them that this was a lie, because they went off to, I think, the oldest one's an engineer, the second one is a veterinarian, and I believe the youngest is an engineer as well. So they said, they're how could they do this? They didn't do those things. And like I said, I was fortunate that my parents never stopped believing me. And then the oldest one actually lives in another province, where my mom's sister lives, and they tried contacting her and telling her that these were lies, and that I should recant what I had said. And but like I said, I was fortunate enough to not have anyone believe them over me. But they still tried, and they used their education or their supposed clout, that they may have had to try to convince others that I was lying, and that they didn't do any of the things that I had said that they did.
Yes, I think that my abusers groomed me. I think the first one groomed me for the second one so that I could be prepared to know what was going to happen. But as far as the first one, I don't remember him like giving me any kind of like special attention, or it wasn't any day. It was just one day he started touching me. And it was just full into it. So you would just have a regular, relationship like you would have with a cousin. We're all hanging out, and so I don't think he did anything special. But then after that, he made sure that we would be in positions that we would be alone. Um, I think that he made sure of that. And like I said, I'm not privy to whatever he said to his brother, because then he would start doing it too, and it became something that I expected to do, like that, to such that I found myself sometimes looking for a space to that we could be alone. So I think that that is how he kind of thrust me into it, and then I just began to expect it.
Um, for me, what I don't think I was groomed. Um, I don't recall being groomed. Um, I think there was no special treatment. There was no niceties or anything special or anything specific that happened that way. It was just um, me placed in a situation, or me them being taking me and getting me into a situation where I was alone. And so they, and yeah, like I said before, I think they ended up grooming my parents and their parents, in terms of allowing that to happen and creating that space. But specifically me, grooming me, no, because and I remember there was bruises that were found. My mom found these bruises on my arm, and I wouldn't tell her. So now that I think about, like, I remember that they would use threats. If I ever told anyone, and so and whatnot. But my mom saw bruises on my arms, and so she made me tell her what had happened, and I was probably at 4. And I remember she went back to them and she lost her mind. And but things just got worse for me. Like, they didn't try to placate me by any means or anything like that. So it was, yeah, they didn't really groom me.
Okay, so I want the public to know that anybody, any race, any gender, can that person can be, you know, a groomer, and that children respond in different ways, right? And so um, I want people to understand that a child, oftentimes a groomer might be, someone who is an authority, or a mentor. It could be a parent, like it could be anyone. And the closer the relationship that child has with that groomer, the more they may love that person. They have an affection, an affinity towards that person. They may be afraid of that person. And so that they may, engage in this behavior, but I want you to understand that they might not even know, a child might not even know that they're actually being groomed, right? So that it's just so important to have conversations with children about, one, not having secrets, because with my abusers, I mean, they never threatened me. They never threatened me, and nor did they ever like hurt me, like physically, like hurt me to try to tell me to stop doing something. It was just something that I knew was wrong. But being able to have conversations with children, to let them know, if someone ever makes you feel uncomfortable, you need to say something, right? And that could be them saying something making you feel uncomfortable, them doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable, just having an open dialogue with children to really understand what's going on. And then also to not just assume that because we're friendly or because we're family, that a child wants to be in a place with another person, by themselves, or even in your presence. Just really understanding if a child is actually comfortable being in a space or being with a person. I think that those things are really important. And when you have that open dialogue with the child, then they would be able to tell you, more, and then be willing to accept it and not have this like crazy reaction that then ultimately scares the kid, um, but really start from young, having these conversations and putting these systems in place so that they do feel comfortable enough to talk to you, and that they are aware of what is appropriate and what is inappropriate, regardless of whomever the person is.
I think the public, in terms of grooming, what they should know is to pay attention to those around you. Pay attention to those that are spending time with children. whether that's teachers, coaches, the bus driver, that anyone who's in that position, who's around kids, the doctor. um, if your child is uncomfortable, listen, create an environment where your child is comfortable enough to come to you and tell you when they're uncomfortable, and actually listen to them. If you see hesitation, them wanting to go somewhere, ask them what that's about. Create a dialogue about how they feel and why it is that they don't want to go. And they may not be able to express it the first time you ask. They may not have the words or understanding of what it is and why they're not wanting to go. But try to listen, do some investigation, and watch your kid, or kids. Pay attention. Don't just as terrible as it sounds, don't trust everyone to have the best for your child. I know that's a terrible way of thinking, but you do need to be vigilant. You need to be sure that that individual is treating your child right, and your child isn't being harmed. That is a responsibility of a parent or a guardian or a caregiver. We should be able to listen and watch for those things. And again, just listen to your child, and even to their nonverbals. It's not necessarily what they say, it may also be what they do or how they're responding or how they're reacting. Yeah, I just think, trust people, but be careful, be vigilant, pay attention, and ask the child what they need, or a survivor what they need before you tell them what they need or you tell them how they feel. Listen to them and let them guide you in terms of what they may or may not need.
Okay, so some red flags that people should look out for that could indicate grooming would potentially be a person just having so much invested time in one particular child, right? Like if there is a situation in which there are just say two or three siblings, but this is the person, like you do something for all of them, but you're always with this person. You're always giving this person special attention, maybe special gifts. Maybe you want to see them alone, away from the others. And it's kind of, and this is why it's so key because even when you go into indicators, because every person internalizes and reacts to trauma differently, right? So, where some person may, what people may say is acting out, another person might be straight laced. I think what is so important is that you have to know your child. So, if you know your child, then you will know when something seems off about them, right? So, you have to really know your child, have those meaningful conversations with them, and spend time actually knowing what their likes and what their dislikes are, what their triggers are, so that you can know when something is off. Because a lot of times people will say, oh, it's just normal teenage behavior. But I mean, I don't really know what that means because someone may, as Nimi was saying, may just not have the words. But if I know my child, then okay, something's not right. You want to talk about it? You know what I'm saying? So I think that it has to be that you have a genuine relationship with the children in your lives. And then obviously, like I said, like if there is someone who is trying to give too much, specialized attention or is doing things or is always trying to take this child away from a situation so that they can be alone, then I would think that that could potentially be a red flag.
I agree with everything that Star said. I think when someone's paying attention to your child more specifically, singling them out, spending time alone with them, or trying to get them alone consistently, and even buying them things, whether it's anything small to like a chocolate bar or a Slurpee to something that's much larger. Pay attention to those things. Ask, why is this happening? Especially if it's only happening to your child or some like one child versus the three or four others. Those are questions. I think also we often don't place enough value on trusting our intuitive feelings or gut, or like sometimes that there's something off, and you can't put your finger on it, but you don't want to say something. But if you don't want to say something, start watching, start asking questions, and start paying attention to the children's behavior, to the adults' behavior, what's happening, and watch the interaction and see, if the child's uncomfortable, and then create that dialogue and that space or the environment where they're comfortable coming to you and telling you that they feel off or they don't like the attention, and then and take it from there.
Okay, so the way we have an open dialogue with our children about everything, we talk about everything. We use the correct terms for body parts, and we have been doing that for as when they were learning their body parts, as soon as they could talk, we've been telling them. And then it's just this idea of letting them know and letting them be well informed. So I'll give you an example. When we wash them up, okay, so I'm washing your body, I'm like, okay, mommy and daddy can give you a bath, mommy and daddy see you naked because we have to wash you up, we have to bathe you. When you go to the doctor, the doctor has to look at your body, but mommy and daddy are always present, right? And that he's only looking at your body, or she's only looking at your body to make sure that you're healthy, right? And so with our son, I let them know. So he may have to lift up your penis, or I don't want them to walk into a situation and be like, what is this? Is this okay? No, this person is only doing this because they are a doctor, and they are not doing this outside of the presence of mommy or daddy or both of us, right? And so you're setting up these boundaries, you're giving them boundaries and telling them what's okay. So, and then you have to always talk to a kid on their level. So it's not just that, so your penis, your vagina, your bottom, no one ever is supposed to touch those. No one is to see those. You don't touch your friends don't touch you. And if someone does that, then you need to tell them to stop. And then you need to let mommy and daddy know. Okay. So it's just always reinforcing and letting them know, like, you can talk to mommy and daddy about anything. And I think what happens is you have to let the kids talk to you about everything, even things that don't matter, even if that's Peppa Pig, even if you're telling me that Peppa Pig went to the doctor today and she had this and that's fine. And that's okay, because you want them to feel comfortable, and you don't want to make it seem like it's something that's wrong. Your body, it's a natural thing. And so it is setting up those boundaries, and it's respecting the boundaries, right? So I asked, can mommy have a hug? Can mommy have a kiss? If they say yes, I do. If they say no, then I don't do it, right? Because it is not just you tell mommy and dad, you can tell everybody no except for mommy and daddy. No, you can tell everybody no. It's your body. If you don't have to hug anyone, you don't have to high five anyone, you don't have to fist bump anyone, you don't have to do any of those things with your body, or allow anyone to do anything to your body that you don't want to. And I think that you have to be consistent with that messaging, and especially as it applies to the parents, because children are so literal. So if you say, they're looking to you as already that you're an adult, so I have to do what you say do, right? And so I'll just give you this really quick example, really quick. My son, from birth, he had written with his left hand, and this really kind of still burns me up. But he had a teacher at one point that I think she told him that writing with your left hand is wrong, right? And so from that day forward, he stopped writing with his left hand. Now he still eats, he still does everything else with his left hand. Of course, I laid her for filth. But the point is, children are literal. So what you tell them, they absorb, and that's what they're going to do. So you have to give them the instruction on what is appropriate, what is inappropriate, and let them know that they can come to you, because whatever you set up, whatever is set up, that's how they're going to operate in those spaces.
I think Starr put this really well in terms of just creating that space and using actual terms for our body parts and at a really young age. And as I was saying earlier, when as soon as I've been asked the question, how soon is it, or what's too soon in order to tell my child about good touch, bad touch, and I said as soon as they learn how to speak, when they're starting to comprehend what you're saying, start teaching them, and start teaching them the actual names of body parts and normalize it for them. I know that often parents will hesitate, um, but if you're uncomfortable having that conversation, then read a book or get help in order to be able to have that conversation with your child, because it is vital. It is vital for them to be comfortable with their body, with their body parts, and then know the right and wrongs of touching, and who can and who can't, and what feels right and what isn't right. And then when someone else is invading their space or their body, then they can come and tell you, if you've created that environment and that had that dialogue, they're going to trust that I can come to you and I can tell you this. So I think the earlier we can start with our kids, the better. The sooner that understanding is developed and that relationship or that rapport is built around that topic specifically, is best for you and your child. And I think that's also even kind of like a base for them to be able to build on other conversations as the years go on, to be able to have different types of conversations, whether they're in their teenage years thinking about, sex or girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever it may be. They can have honest, real conversations with you that'll probably give you a lot of peace of mind. And just to allow that, I think we often shy away from conversations that are difficult, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, if you can't have that conversation, go get help to be able to have that conversation. If it's reading a book, talking to a therapist, a professional, your doctor, whoever it may be, get that help in order to have that conversation so you're having it in a more comfortable way for yourself and for your child.